was the middle of 1971. I'd been home about 2 weeks, and I'd only heard about Cain's from my wild-ass uncles and grandparents who used to go there, and they would rave about how wild it was, and you could buy bootleg whiskey out the back door, and the bootleggers left their business cards taped inside the old wooden phone booth. Or, "Oh, Larry, I heard that you can come and try out this afternoon down at Cain's." So I go down there and I walk in the building for the first time. I didn't know it was still standing, and I literally got a shiver up my backbone. Just the smell and the feel of the place, it had so much DNA in the floor and the walls, and I could tell that something big had happened in the place musically. I knew it set the hook in my mouth, and I never thought I'd go back in there or especially buy it a few years later, which I did. And by the summer of 1976, Peter Frampton come out with what at the time was the biggest album that had ever come out, Frampton Comes Alive. And that summer of it was right in the middle of the record being #1. I put that show out at the Tulsa Fairgrounds Speedway, and it sold 33 or 34,000 seats, and for the first time I'd have made a big stack of money. At about the same time, Cain's had been put on the market for sale. So I said, I want to own the place. So I took my bag of money and made an offer for Cain's and put down the earnest money, and I ended up closing the deal in 1976 and moving in there. I would say within 6 months I started booking shows that a lot of them turned out to be superstars. I mean, I broke Van Halen on that stage at Cain's. Of course, the infamous Sex Pistols show, Bon Jovi, Muddy Waters, Lightning Hopkins, Annie Lennox, The Police. I got it going, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. I like to say that I never thought that anything that we were doing, that I was doing at Cain's, was historical. I didn't think that had any importance. As it's turned out decades later, I guess it has. I know a little bit about it, and the reason I do is I spent my youth there. I owned it for 25 years, and the place is still in my blood, and it always will be. It'll always be in my blood. The history of Cain's really starts at the turn of the century, 1900, 1905, when Tulsa was becoming a boom town for the oil industry, and it was almost like the gold rush in California. So, especially from the East Coast, you got engineers and high rollers and gamblers. That included J. Paul Getty, Henry Sinclair, Frank Phillips. There was a rush on Tulsa to get here and drill oil wells, and to open up companies that were support in manufacturing and oil field equipment. And with that drew a community of laborers. So I think that was the big magnet for Tulsa. But Tate Brady was, of course, a controversial figure now these days. But he was one of those guys that built stores and ran them well, and he was a big thinker, and he wasn't afraid to take a risk. Inevitably, he ended up building several buildings, and of course the most famous one, as it's turned out to be, is the Cain's Ballroom. And it was originally built in 1924, and the purpose of it when it was being built was to be a car dealership, automobile dealership. Well, that deal fell apart, and it ends up opening as a legitimate dance hall, a ballroom. In the meantime, there was another guy that came in from, I think he was from Long Island. His name was Madison Cain. He had learned everything you could learn about ballroom dancing and instruction, and the formal training that you would only get in New York City. He figured if he could get to Tulsa, or in this oil patch, he would figure out a way to make his fortune. He actually owned the first Cain's Ballroom was in Drumright, Oklahoma. Most people don't know that. There was a Cain's Ballroom before the famous one that now stands. There was one downtown on either 1st or 2nd Street. And so there was a Cain's before the Cain's. That dance instructor, Madison Cain, ends up buying the ballroom, I believe from Tate Brady, in 1932. As it turned out, Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys landed in Tulsa a little bit after that. So let me back up. Probably Madison Cain come in 1930-ish, maybe 1930. Bob became so huge in Tulsa because of the strength of KVOO radio that he was instantly drawing big dance crowds. And he was using the Playmore Ballroom over on downtown Tulsa, east downtown, just off Madison Street. Didn't have enough room. It held 600 people. Madison Cain suffers a stroke, and by 1937, the Ballroom is sold to a partnership which included O.W. Mayo, the manager for Bob, and Bob. They were co-partners. In the late 30s, Bob was so big and KVO signal was so strong that you could actually pick up Bob Wills' live performances. When the weather was just right and the atmosphere was just right, you could pick up KVOO in Bakersfield, California, which is where Merle Haggard listened to Bob Wills as a young kid. That's where he got addicted to Bob. Anyway, things got bigger and better and faster, and the Ballroom got stronger, and I hope it's here forever. And it, like I said earlier, it's in my blood, and it'll never go away. I believe in the place. I'm glad that I had my part to play in it.
Where's that gal, the red dress on? Some folks called her Dinah. Stole my heart away from me way down in Louisiana. Take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back to Tulsa.